Join the coven. The Lockdown, a story written by N. Carroll, 860. I took a seat in my 4th period science class. Also my favorite class because the teacher, Mr. Kennedy, is just, well, hilarious. I was still extremely tired, it only being 10 a.m. Athletics is my first period, which basically drains all my energy. I was staring blankly at the warm-up on the whiteboard, asking some question about the hormones involved in the endocrine system. When the bell rang, signaling that class has started, I heard the door to the classroom shut, and the lock made a slight click, and looked up to see a sub enter the class. A disappointed sigh spread across the room. Everyone hated science class. Mr. Kennedy was the only reason people tolerated the class. Without him, it was bound to be a boring 55 minutes. I pitied the sub. After all, it wasn't his fault the class was prone to be chaotic. In fact, he must be a new staff member of our school. I've never seen him on campus before. He gave us 5 minutes to do our warm-up. About 3 minutes into that time, a blaring noise sounded through the intercom. Attention, attention, this is not a drill. Code Black, lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. Follow the procedures of a Code Black lockdown. The intercom crackled as the principal's warning echoed across the classroom, fading into silence. The sub walked over to the already locked doors to pull the laminated paper down to cover the window. He then ushered us into the corner opposite his desk. Everyone was quiet. Our school had never been through a real lockdown. And in the drills we have done, everyone was informed that it was a drill, and it was even announced as such over the intercom. We were starting to panic, people pulling out their phones to text their parents and tell them what was going on and that they loved them, as if this was the last time that they would ever get to talk to them. The sub throughout this whole ordeal was surprisingly calm. I assumed he was just trying to keep the kids from freaking out. I sent a text to my mom to no avail. I had no service, nor did anyone else. That was just before the power went out. When I think back, the most disturbing part was the silence. No one spoke. No one moved. No one even dared to breathe. There were no screams, no gunshots, no noise, no anything. Just dead silence. A couple of my peers attempted to call the police, but they couldn't even manage to receive a single bar. We sat in complete darkness for about 5 hours of nothing. No information, no announcement saying it was safe to come out. No communication with the outside world. Then the sub spoke in a hushed whisper. I'm going to find out what's been going on. It's been a long time, and we have no form of communication with anyone. I'm going to sneak to the principal's office. Maybe I can get some cell service and call the police. Everyone murmured in agreement, although we all knew it was dangerous, and we weren't supposed to, and I think the sub knew that too. But we had been waiting there for so long. I don't think we had the capability to process logic anymore. But, he said, there's one problem. I left my cell phone at home, and the power is out, so I won't be able to use the landline in the office. That means one of you will need to bring your phone and come with me. Hopefully we can get some service and contact the authorities. He forced a smile, trying to encourage us, even though he knew how dangerous this could be. I'll do it, a girl named Lily spoke up. Okay, he said in a level voice. He scanned through everyone else until his eyes locked on mine. What's your name, he asked. "Maddie," I whispered. "Okay, Maddie, you're in charge." He raised his voice slightly, so everyone could hear. He pulled me to the side and whispered into my ear, "We will be back in a couple of minutes. Do not open the door for anyone, okay?" "Okay," I replied. "Try your best to keep them calm, alright?" "I will." I forced my voice to sound much more confident than I really was. "Okay," he spoke. "We will be back. Listen to Maddie. She is in charge." And with that, he opened the door, locking it behind him, and left with Lily. After about 10 minutes, I got restless. My head was spinning. Then a realization hit me like a brick. Landlines don't need power. I was starting to panic. The sub didn't need a phone. He didn't even need to leave the room, let alone take Lily with him. I was struggling to stay calm. I couldn't let anybody see me break down. They were all looking up to me. If they knew I was scared out of my mind, all hell would break loose. I walked over to the desk, slowly, careful not to make any noise. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking as I went to dial 911. "Crap," I cursed under my breath as the phone fell from my hand. I braced myself for the sound it would make as it slammed to the ground. But to my surprise, there was no sound. I opened my eyes to see that the cord was just short of the floor, keeping it suspended, an inch above the tile. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Relieved, I slowly, carefully bent down to retrieve the phone. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, parallel to the phone under the desk, gagged and bound, was my science teacher, Mr. Kennedy. If he was here, that means Lily just left with a stranger, an intruder that broke into the school, tied up her science teacher, and pretended to be a new sub. The next few minutes were a blur. The lockdown ended, police bursting into every room, taking a head count, calling every student's name to make sure they were all accounted for. Everyone was, except for one person, Lily Lee Emerson. She was never seen again after that day. Neither was the sub. If there's one lesson to take from this, never trust someone you don't know, and never, ever leave a room during a lockdown. He's still out there, and your school may be next. If a man you've never seen before comes into your class claiming to be your sub and your school undergoes an unplanned lockdown, just remember, it's not too late to be afraid. Something in the Woods by LadyAndain. I guess I'll start with the background. I'm a 33-year-old female, but the story takes place when I was a teenager, living in a suburb of Chicago. The village I lived in was quiet and middle class. We lived like a mile from the police station, and the worst crimes we had was a murder or two, and robbery once in a blue moon. 99% of the time, boring. And more boring. Unless you had a car, you were stuck just walking around the park at night with your friends. Kind of boring. Anyway, one night my girlfriend and I decided to go hang out at the park with some guys at like 12 a.m. The night was a bit windy, and we had a full moon. I even got a kiss that night from the boy I liked. But the night wasn't just fun and hanging out late. There's a deep forest in the park with a stream with a playground right next to it. The same playground we went to, with swings and a jungle gym. There's 2 bridges, one of wood, the one everyone uses, and one bridge made of rocks that's rarely used because it's deeper in the forest, over the stream, connecting the two halves of the forest/park area. I'll get to the rock bridge in a minute. We hung around on the swings and chatted, and just spent the evening together. I'm sitting and just looking around, talking and enjoying the peace and quiet and the moonlight. I have a full view of the forest and the dip of earth that I know leads to the stream. I see something moving over that dip of earth. Some dark shape. It looked like it was crawling out of the forest. An arm, then another arm. It pulls itself out of the ditch/stream. A figure darker than the surrounding forest. And I'm sitting there frozen. I think I'm seeing things. It just kind of lays there on the ground but doesn't move. A flash of fear grips me. What if it comes this way? I looked at my friends and no one notices anything. I look back and it's gone. Did it go back or go somewhere? I really want to get out of there. Then one friend asks, "Did you guys hear about the urban legend of the rock bridge over the stream? Apparently some kids or something played on the bridge and fell over and died." What a thing to say after what I just saw. But I didn't ask anyone anything and just pretended I didn't see anything. But the experience stuck with me. I never talked about it because it must have just been my imagination. Things like that happen only in scary movies, right? But I rarely went to that park after that. And Black Thing, if you are real, I hope we never meet again. Who knows what could have happened if you saw me the same time I saw you. Out of the Dark. Story written by JankyTank64. My first experience with the supernatural was one of the most terrible life experiences I can remember. It happened when I was young and dumb and wanted to go out into the world and explore. While I was out in my home country of Canada, I witnessed a horror I soon hoped to forget. I had gone on a trip with some of my buddies to Montana, just below my home province of Alberta. We were originally going to stay in Yellowstone National Park, but decided to head to Glacier National Park first, before camping out at Yellowstone for a few days. We finally reached Glacier Park after a 6-hour drive and had just enough time to do a little hiking before going to our hotel in the nearby town to rest and move on towards Yellowstone. We had gotten to the park around 4:30 p.m. and decided it was a great idea to hike after dark. So we hiked up the trail, looking at the glorious views of the rivers and waterfalls of the Avalanche Creek Trail. The light began to fade rather quickly while we were about 2/3 of the way up, and we hiked into the trail about 10 kilometers, so it would take us about 2 hours to walk back down from that point. This is when it all goes downhill. Myself and my friends were all outdoorsmen and loved to go hiking and travel around the Rocky Mountains, but we were still inexperienced when it came to night hiking. Since the trail we were on wasn't as traveled at this part of the hike, the trail was hard to follow in the dark, although every now and then we would see a sign that notified us that we were going in the right direction. At some point, maybe a third of the way down the mountain, we ended up going off the trail, following a little rabbit trail, thinking we were still on the correct path. We began to figure out that we were definitely not going in the right way, as my friend checked his compass, showing we were heading deeper into the Rocky Mountains, miles and miles of forests. Then begins the mass panic. My friends and I immediately turned around and began walking the way we came. But the trail we were following didn't look the same as it had before, leading us to being even more lost than before. That is when we collectively noticed how quiet it had gotten. No insects, no birds, nothing. It was dead silence. I knew this was a bad sign, as I am a hunter, and when it gets quiet like this, it means that there is a large predator around, and it's hunting. We had literally become prey to some unknown beast in the woods. We all began getting a sudden spike of anxiety when I let the guys know what was up. That's when we hear it. A noise that brought terror. A guttural howl from up the mountain. It was then followed by many more. My heart went into my throat, and the terror I felt made me shake. Most of my friends did the same, all but two. The others had already dipped and begun running in the direction opposite the howls. We soon followed, after running ourselves ragged until we looked behind and saw the eye shine of something that was much larger than we had anticipated. The eyes were at least 6 feet off the ground and moving towards us fast. That is when we split up, running in random directions, hoping to lose the beasts. It was never going to happen. I could hear the breath of one of these things about 20 feet behind me and gaining. All of a sudden, my friend appears from the trees to my right, and we end up running together until I cut off from him, hoping to escape. I know I left him to die that night, but it was a last-ditch effort that worked out to my advantage. I heard his screams from my left and ran as fast as I could away from them with tears rolling down my face. As I hear his screams for help and him shrieking in pain, then nothing, as if he never existed. I continue running down the mountain until I see a familiar sight ahead of me. It was one of the trail signs showing how far you were on the trail. I stopped, checked where I was, and started running again, hoping to get away from the creatures on the mountain. Another kilometer down the trail, I began hearing howls getting closer and closer by the moment, causing me to run even harder. Looking ahead, I see the sign saying parking lot, and zoom past it in my panic, looking for my keys in my pocket and scrambling towards the only vehicle still left in the parking lot, which was my car. I used my fob to unlock my car from a distance and run as hard as I could towards it, slamming into the side of my door and opening it, hopping in and starting the car. I look out my window towards the trail entrance to see 2 pairs of eyes staring at me from just out of the range of the lampposts. They stare at me before disappearing back into the bush. As I drive away, never looking back, I arrived at the ranger station by the park entrance and ran inside, looking disheveled and terrified. I began telling the ranger at the desk what had just happened. He then looked at me with a sad face, as if he knew something like this would happen, and called up the search and rescue team to come in the morning to look for them. They were never found. Can a Mirror Lie? A story written by Grey Potato 421. My name isn't important, but what is important is that man. I am a 15-year-old male who became interested in spells at 13. I've spent the whole time between those ages experimenting with spells. Most turned out to be for summoning, and others were curses. I devoted nearly a month trying to cast a curse on someone I wasn't particularly fond of. It succeeded. But that same night, I saw a man. He was dressed in a pitch-black trench coat and plague doctor's mask. He was only visible because of a slight glow coming from my charging phone. He didn't say a word. He just stood and stared. I tried to ignore him by going to sleep, but the feeling of being watched became stronger. I woke to see him nearly a foot away from my face, breathing heavily. He then stood up and walked through the wall he was facing. That was my only encounter with him until about a month later. I was looking in the mirror. After taking a shower, I saw him standing behind me. This time he spoke. "How do you continue?" I didn't think about answering the question until he demanded me to do so. He yelled angrily, "Answer!" My only response was what I didn't know. I wanted to see if he wanted anything else from me. He said nothing. I turned to leave and he was gone. I checked the mirror again and he wasn't there either. Since then, I perpetually felt like I was being watched. I've seen him on street corners, other seats in school and restaurants, and in the mirror as well. He continues to speak with me, but I never respond. For those getting interested in spellcasting, I would strongly advise against it. I almost accidentally joined a cult. A story written by Mad Max 2298. I had been working as a second shift shelf stalker at my local Walmart for the past month or so, which means I occasionally get to deal with the creepy customers near the end of my shift. Normally I can sense when someone or something isn't right, which isn't the case for this story, unfortunately. Anyways, I was told to stock the shelves in the area by the pharmacy desk, which is fine by me because not many people come by that side of the store, especially once the pharmacy desk closes for the day. As I am stocking the aisle that had the cold medicine in it, a girl comes up to me and says, "You seem like a fun person to talk to." In my mind, I'm like, okay, weird, but whatever. And on the outside, I put on my best retail smile and say, "Sure, what can I help you with?" The girl proceeds to say she has a bet going on with her dad right now, and if she wins the bet, she'll get $100, and she was wondering if I could help her out. Me, being the good-hearted person I am, say that I could help her out. Couldn't be that hard, right? The girl then proceeds to get her guardian, which is a middle-aged woman who then introduces herself. The lady then explains that to help the girl get the $100, I'd have to watch a 20-minute video with them. Obviously, I couldn't do this now as I was working, so they asked me what time I get off work and what I was going to be doing afterwards. I let them know I get off at 11 and that I was going to drive home with my mom because we both work the same shift at the same store and she doesn't drive. The lady then says, "Okay, well, maybe we can meet you at the South Side McDonald's around 11:15 tonight to watch the video. Do you mind if I get your phone number so we can call you?" At this point in time, I was completely oblivious to what was actually happening and gave them my phone number like a complete idiot. The lady then thanks me and says they'll call me around 11:15 and then we could go from there. After they walked away, I realized what had just happened and what I just did and started freaking out. I then went on my last break and told my mom what happened, all while sobbing and freaking out. We decided to go tell management about the incident, and they decided that when my mom and I were both done with work that night, we would be escorted out to our car for extra safety. After this, we told our supervisor what happened and described the individuals to him, and he said he was sure he had dealt with the same people before at his previous job, and supposedly the same night I was approached by these people, another one of my co-workers encountered them as well, with the same spiel and everything. As my mom and I were being escorted out, I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, and they didn't leave a voicemail. I started freaking out again, and we decided to go to the cops just to play it safe. After we told the officer the story and gave them the phone number that had called me, He said that it was really weird for this to be happening in our town, which is relatively small in my opinion. After an hour later, I got a call from the officer I had just talked to and found out some more information about these people that approached me. He called the number I gave him and posed as a friend of mine to get more information, and found out they were trying to recruit me to work for them by traveling and earning money. It's even more sketchy when I was told that this group has a website, a YouTube channel, you name it. The officer also tells me that the group is a pyramid scheme, which is illegal in the US and elsewhere. Basically, if you don't know what it is, it's a form of investment where a paying participant has to recruit 2 more participants, and once these 2 people have been recruited, the people who talk them into joining them get paid more money, and the newer people get paid less money. The interesting thing was the fact that I didn't get a creepy vibe from the customers. They were genuinely nice and friendly people. However, they almost seemed too nice to not be up to something, obviously. This happened to me a few days ago, and I'm still having panic attacks about it, and the managers at my store are hopefully going to gather us all together at one point and give us some tips if this happens again, as it is currently not part of our training stuff we have to go through. Not the ending you're expecting. A story written by LinearEqualist. Several years ago, my family lived in a sketchy area of a small town in South Carolina. Our neighbor, 2 doors down, was a well-known drug dealer, and there was always shady people walking up and down our street and through our yard late at night. Now, my fiance is a night owl, and I worked nights, so we were always up late. My daughters weren't in school yet, and thankfully liked to sleep in as much as we did. So it wasn't uncommon for he and I to be up at 2 or 3 in the morning, watching TV and playing internet poker. We didn't have curtains or blinds on most of the windows, so it was obvious that we were awake and in the brightly lit living room that late at night. Everyone in the neighborhood was also familiar with our 2 oversized Czech German Shepherd dogs. Our female was around 160 pounds, and our male was around 120 pounds. They could also be both seen through the window at night by anyone looking in. So, for a few weeks, we had been having issues with hearing sounds outside at night. But when we went to check, typically, the person would be gone, and we'd find nothing but a pry bar near the window where they had been trying to get in. By the time we moved from that neighborhood, we had a collection of them, and we had found outside our house. What couldn't be seen through the windows was that my fiancé had drilled holes through both wooden frames of each window, and then had them held in place with 3-inch nails, so they couldn't be opened without taking the nails out of the holes. One night, we were sitting in the living room at around 3 in the morning, and we hear a sound at the window directly between our 2 computers. The dogs were sitting in front of the window, just growling and staring out. And when we looked outside, we could see a guy trying to pry the window open. We both stood in front of the window staring at him. The dogs were barking, but he was so drugged up, apparently he didn't notice any of us there until my fiancé knocked on the window. He ran off, and my fiancé headed out to collect his pry bar. We figured that would be the end of it, but the next night, the same guy was at it again at a different window in the living room. The process repeated, with my fiancé knocking on the window and scaring him off, and then collecting the bar. When he showed up on the 3rd night, we had decided we had enough. This time, instead of knocking on the window, my fiancé went outside without alerting him. So this is what the guy trying to break into the house saw. First, my fiancé steps out onto the porch. He's 6'5", but skinny, and uses a cane a large portion of the time. So despite his height, he appears pretty non-threatening. When the guy noticed him there, he didn't try to run this time, apparently thinking he could take him. They stared each other down for a few minutes, and when the guy raised the pry bar like he was going to move towards my fiancé, all hell broke loose. My fiancé, despite using a cane, is fast when he needs to be. In an instant, he popped open the front door, releasing both the dogs, and at the same time pulled a machete out of the back of his pants and took off after the guy. So here this guy thinks he got an easy target, only to be chased down by nearly 300 combined pounds of snarling teeth and muscle, and a crazy skinny white guy with a machete. I've never seen a crackhead run so fast. All I can say is, housebreaking drug addict guy, for your sake, I hope we never meet again.